So we're quite fortunate here today. This is 2 sunny days in a row. I think it's supposed to go up to 12 or 14 today. So we're optimistic.
Yes.
That's great.
And feeling good. Actually, it's a little bit of spring. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
How is it in Washington?
It's supposed to be really nice today, like up to 25, and sunny.
I remember that.
I know.
We'll get it.
But no, it's been pretty good here. I mean, it's about 10 degrees warmer, I find, normally than New Brunswick.
Yeah. I think we've hit highs here, actually record highs here this spring in Halifax. That they're record highs.
Yeah, my parents were saying it went up to 22 degrees or something a couple of weeks ago.
Oh wow!
And they're in northern New Brunswick.
Okay.
So
they're in the thick of it as well.
Yeah.
COVID. Sorry, Aaron. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We're gonna get going. Yeah, we've got everyone on board here. We're ready to get started. So.
Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Erin Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Association of CBDCs. Today is the final webinar in our 4-part series, and we'll be focusing on the Inter-American Development Bank today. I hope you have enjoyed our IFI series. I know I've learned so much over the last 3 webinars, and we'll be learning more today, I'm sure. A brief background on how we ended up welcoming you to all of these webinars. So my organization, the CBDC, acts as the project proponent for a number of export projects. And in collaboration with our funding partner, ACOA, we decided that it would be beneficial for Atlantic Canadian companies to give you all an overview of what IFIs are, how they work, and what you need to know about working with them. Special thanks to Craig Williams at ACOA for his support on this project, and also to my favorite consultants, Paula, Arturo, and Lucia. They've managed logistics and behind the scenes and all of that stuff, and it's gone so well, thanks to them. We've got a number of speakers on our agenda today, and we've left time for questions at the end. Feel free to use the chat. You can pop your questions in there throughout the webinar, and then at the end, I will ask those for you. If you prefer to verbalize your question, you can ask in the chat to be unmuted at the question and answer period at the end, and we can do that for you. The session is being recorded, and we will be sharing a copy of that recording and all of the slide decks after the webinar to everyone that's registered. And we're also going to be including a survey for feedback. So we ask that you take a few minutes to please fill that out for us. It's very beneficial to help us with planning for future events. So take a minute to do that. At this time, I'm going to ask Craig Williams from ACOA to introduce our first speaker.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome from sunny Halifax, I'm delighted to say. Thank you so much, Aaron, and we're delighted to have you and the Nova Scotian Association of CBDCs to host this. So thank you very much. I want to thank Aaron, but also there's a number of different organizations that have helped this happen here today. Want to recognize the Liffey Network, in particular, Leah and Julie out of the Washington office, who have done yeoman service in promoting this and really bumped up the numbers of registrants that we see from outside of Canada and outside of Atlantic Canada. Also, the PSLO network, there's about 10 PSLOs across Canada who have pushed this out to their participants. I think we had about 60 registrants for this session. So thank you very much. And lastly, to the Trade Commissioners Network, throughout Canada and the Caribbean. Thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate your energy. On behalf of the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, I would like to welcome you all. I work here in Halifax with the Trade Division. It's a small group, and we, as to promote trade, we fund research, we fund training, and we fund trade development strategies such as trade missions and shows, to support growth export capacity within individual companies in Atlantic Canada. So we're delighted to be here and to be able to host this for free, I might add. There was a cost, and there's been a lot of work put into this, and I'm not overplaying this. Paula and Arturo have put a ton, as well as all of the people that I've talked about, thanks so far, but we haven't charged you guys a dime, but there is a cost. And the cost is this. Following this session, over the next few days, there will be a questionnaire coming out, and we want you to fill it out. So I'm going to give you a minute now to kind of make a commitment in your own mind to me and to yourself to complete the questionnaire when it shows up and you don't send it to the trash. That's going to be our price of participation for the last 4 sessions. Okay, so I want to thank you very much in advance for kindly completing that. It won't be laborious to complete, and it'll be just a link to a simple survey product. So thank you very much. And again, I'll thank you in advance for completing that. We are fortunate to have, again, on session 4, a generous menu of experienced and informed speakers today. That can give us, that are individuals within the various development banks that have their finger on the pulse of what's going on and the funding scenarios and priorities within their specific IFIs. Today, we're looking at the Inter-American Development Bank, and we're going to introduce the speakers very shortly. But before we do that, I'm delighted to be able to have the opportunity to once again introduce the IFI officer who is responsible and Canada's conduit through global affairs with the Inter-American Development Bank, Leah Johnston, who's based out of Washington. Leah is also a trade commissioner with Global Affairs and is based, as I said, in Washington, D.C. And prior to joining the team, Leah was the procurement officer for aid funding business with the Department of International Trade at the British Embassy in Washington. In this role, she helped UK companies navigate and find success in the World Bank Group, the Inter-American Development Bank, USAID, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. So Leah comes with a significant background and is a great pathfinder for our companies throughout Canada. So she's a great resource, along with her colleague, Julie Mann, out of the Washington office. So I am now going to give you the floor, Leah. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Craig, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Johnston. I'm a trade commissioner in the Office of Liaison with the International Financial Institutions based in Washington, D.C. We call ourselves IFI for short. My colleague Julie Mann and I work with Canadian companies that are working with the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. I'll be joined by my colleague Darren Rogers, who's a senior counselor in the Office of the Executive Director for Canada to the Inter-American Development Bank. And our agenda for the portion of our presentation is I'll be covering off on the Trade Commissioner Service and the IFI and PSLO networks. Darren will be talking about the ED team and his role within the team, and then give some insights and priorities on IDB finance projects and how Canadian companies can access these business opportunities. So the role of an IFI Trade Commissioner, we're a little bit different from other trade commissioners in the Trade Commissioner Service. And before I go into that, I should probably back up and talk a little bit about the Trade Commissioner Service. Our role is to support Canadian companies as they export and expand around the globe. We're in over 100 markets. Most trade commissioners are split up by sector. The IFI Trade Commissioners are a little bit different because we're covering institutions. So we work across all the sectors that the institutions cover. And our role is really to act as a conduit for Canadian companies that are trying to work with these international financial institutions. A lot of what we do is sort of demystify and explain how these institutions work, how the procurement processes work, how companies can become engaged and follow the pipeline of business opportunities. We can also assess your market potential for the IFIs, as well as identify qualified key contacts. And this can be done at their headquarters with the IDB in Washington, D.C., or in their borrowing member countries. The IDB has offices in all borrowing member countries, and about half of their staff are based there. We can also help you explain at which level to go in the IFIs and kind of explain how they're structured. We can also help resolve problems that may arise during the procurement process, or explain IDB procurement policies so that you understand your rights as a bidder and as a contractor. We coordinate Canadian participation in key events, such as sector-specific trade missions, business opportunity fairs. We were in Atlantic, Canada a little over a year ago. And Darren joined as well as Adriana Salazar from the IDB's procurement team to talk about how to work with the IDB and the different types of opportunities that are available to Canadian companies. More recently, we have been hosting a lot of webinars, which some of you may have joined. Darren and I host one in February on the IDB, kind of going over the basics of the sovereign arm of the IDB and how to find those business opportunities and some tips for contractors. We also disseminate business opportunities where we know there's Canadian expertise, or if it's in a country where we know that Canadian companies tend to work, or if we know it's a unique opportunity that may only come up, every once in a while, such as every 5 years or so. Those are kind of the general ways that we support companies, but it really depends on, what your experience is with the IFIs in developing markets and what you're hoping to do. Each company is different and has different, amount of resources they can put towards this. So if there's other information or services that you would like, just please let us know, and we're happy to provide that type of support. All the IFI trade commissioners are co-located with the major IFIs. As I mentioned, I'm in Washington covering the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the 2 U.S. agencies for international development, which is USAID and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I also cover the New York agencies of the UN. My colleague Fahim Noor Ali is a climate finance trade commissioner, and he also covers those institutions as well as private financing institutions. My colleague Tammy Brathwaite, who, if you joined the session about a week and a half ago, you all heard from her. She's based in Bridgetown, covering the Caribbean Development Bank. Ulaj Kamara is based in Abidjan, covering the African Development Bank. Lily Zhu is in Beijing, covering the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And Grimmy Guarco is based in Manila, covering the Asian Development Bank. We work together very closely because these institutions work together very closely and often co-finance projects. So I would say that if you're interested in any of those institutions, I've included their contact details here. Please feel free to reach out to them directly, or I'm happy to also make an introduction. And as Erin mentioned, we will be sharing these presentations following the conclusion of this webinar. So you don't feel like you need to write it all down right now. Another resource that's available to Canadian companies is the Private Sector Liaison Officer Network, or PSLO network. It's a group that was started by the World Bank about 20 years ago, and it's now recognized by all the major IFIs. And it's a group of business intermediary organizations in more than 90 countries, designed to facilitate interactions with the World Bank and the private sector. Craig Williams, who you just heard for, is the PSLO for Halifax. And he works closely also with our regional offices to support Canadian companies that are trying to work with the World Bank, the IDB, and all the other institutions. We frequently collaborate to host events, spread World Bank, IDB, other IFI knowledge, and to make sure that companies are as connected as they can be to these institutions. With that, I will hand back over to Craig. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Leah. We missed you this year, and hopefully we will see you and Darren back here next year. But this is a reasonable facsimile given the environment. So thank you very much. Yeah, so it's my pleasure also to introduce Darren Rogers. Darren is on the executive director's team. And is going to provide insights into the IBD's priorities in the region. Darren is the senior counselor, and this is just going to, at the Office of the Executive Director for Canada at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. He was previously the development counselor at Canada's permanent delegation to the OECD in Paris, where he represented Canada in the OECD Development Assistance Committee. Darren has also served at the Canadian Embassy in Colombia and at Canada's mission to the Organization of American States. He has worked in development cooperation for over 20 years, primarily in inclusive growth, human rights, and governance in Latin America and Africa. He was born, and this is an overwhelming, shining characteristic, was born and raised in New Brunswick and speaks English, French, and Spanish. So it's my pleasure and honor to give Darren the stage. And Darren, I see you're on mute, so just there you go. Okay, thank you very much. It's yours.
Thanks very much, Craig, and thanks to everybody who had a hand in organizing this event today. It's a real pleasure to be among you today. Based here in DC, but my heart is often in the Maritimes, and so it's really nice to be here today. I'm going to go quite quickly. I only have about 10 minutes, but I've included some slides kind of more for reference afterwards, because you'll see some good links to be able to kind of access them if you're looking to access more information that's on the websites or what have you. And I'm really going to talk briefly about kind of what the IDB is, the priorities, and briefly opportunities for Canadian businesses that are looking to work with the IDB. So when we say the IDB, we're actually talking about three separate entities. There's the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB Invest, and IDB Lab. Now, the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, is the biggest in terms of kind of financing, and it lends to governments in Latin America and the Caribbean. It provides loans, guarantees, grants, and technical cooperation, technical assistance type stuff. IDB Invest focuses more on the private sector in Latin America and the Caribbean, so it lends to usually Latin American Canadian companies. And it also takes, some equity positions as well. And then IDB Lab is a smaller operation, but it kind of acts as the innovation laboratory for the IDB group. And often that takes the form of taking kind of, investing in startup companies in the region that are contributing to development and that have potential to kind of grow. The IDB has 48 member countries, so 26 borrowing countries, meaning they take, they borrow money from the bank, and then 22 non-borrowing countries. And so you'll see Canada there under the non-borrowing countries. We're in a bit of a privileged position at the IDB because only Canada and the United States are the only two countries that have kind of their own chairs on the IDB boards of directors. All the other chairs are kind of grouped in with, different constituencies. And that's because we're a non-borrowing country, but we're in the hemisphere, right? So that's, I'm kind of in the office of the executive director for Canada, representing Canada on the board, along with my colleagues. We're 6 people. And our main kind of, function there is to provide strategic direction to the bank, obviously kind of, anchored in Canadian priorities. We also approve most of the loans and kind of operations that go through the bank. And we're also there as a point of contact for Canadian stakeholders who are interested in, collaborating with the bank. So whether that's individuals or civil society, NGOs, or Canadian businesses. And in that kind of respect, we work really closely with Leah and her team, Olifi, to make sure that we can kind of provide a level of service to Canadian companies. So the IDB strategic priorities, the big thing to remember is that its overarching goal is improving lives in Latin America and the Caribbean. And so everything that it does is oriented towards social and economic development in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's the largest provider of development finance in the region. So it lends more to the region than the World Bank does. So if you're interested in kind of working in Latin America or the Caribbean, it's really worth considering looking at the IDB. Headquartered in DC, and that's where I'm based, but there are offices in each of the borrowing member countries. And Leah mentioned this. It's a really important resource for Canadian businesses. If you're interested in working in a particular country or you're already working in a country, we always really encourage people to just kind of make the connection with the local country office. Not necessarily, to go sell yourselves, but just to kind of share information about what you're doing in the country and get any information about what, what opportunities might be upcoming there. The other thing I'd mention is, as cross-cutting themes that are interwoven into everything that the IDB does, there's gender equality and diversity. climate change and environmental sustainability, and institutional capacity and rule of law. So often these are very much aligned with, you know, the Canadian private sector value added, which is useful. I won't go into this very much, but this is just to give you an idea of the types of sectors that the IDB is working in and supporting in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I think the main takeaways here are first, the IDB is working in a lot of different sectors, from, you know, health to education to energy to water and sanitation. And so there's a wide swath of kind of potential engagement there. The other thing I'd mention is that top bar there, which is reform and modernization of the state. That can be linked to specific sectors. So it could be, you know, a reform of the water sector or a reform of the energy sector in Peru or Guyana or what have you. And so that's kind of distributed down there. And when you take that into account, in any given year, about 50% of what the IDB does is actually focused on infrastructure, whether that's transportation or energy or water and sanitation. And the other thing that I'd mention is, as of a couple of years ago, the IDB has committed to at least 30% of its financing being climate related. And we're expecting that number to actually go up in the coming years. Obviously, like everybody else, the IDB has been responding to COVID over the last year. And I think what I would highlight here is that that has meant that there's been more health programming, but it hasn't been exclusively health programming. So there's been a continuity of sectors, given that, you know, countries obviously are having to respond to the public health emergency, but they're also having to kind of, you know, maintain a continuity of operations for their populations. And so you'll see here that, you know, even that COVID response was still, you know, looking at support to SMEs and looking at kind of, you know, making sure that there was employment and delivery of public services and that kind of thing. The other thing I'd highlight here just is that there is a commitment to commit $1 billion this year to help Latin America and the Caribbean acquire and distribute vaccines. And that includes storage and distribution facilities and that kind of thing. Latin America and the Caribbean has been the hardest hit region globally, both, you know, socially and economically from the pandemic. And so a lot of countries are still very much in kind of emergency response mode. But the bank and countries are also kind of, you know, transitioning towards thinking of the green recovery, right? And recently, management of the bank has come in proposing kind of key opportunities for recovery that you'll see there. So strengthening regional value change, digitalization, continued support to SMEs, gender and diversity, climate and environmental sustainability, and then really looking at, you know, addressing the urgent needs in sectors that have been heavily impacted by the pandemic. So, you know, tourism, especially in the Caribbean, but health, education, and again, that continuity of kind of programming across sectors. Our office has kind of done, you know, a bit of analysis in terms of identifying sectors and subsectors of emerging relevance for Canadian firms. And what you'll see here is kind of our preliminary analysis, very much overlap with the last slide in terms of kind of opportunities for recovery. And this is looking at kind of both where Canadian companies have had success on bidding on IDB contracts in the past, and, you know, where we've seen interest from Canadian companies in the future and where the bank is going. So renewable energy and clean tech, and it's not just renewable energy, but kind of cleaner energy there. Environmental services and technology, Canadian firms tend to do quite well there. Health, and what we're seeing more and more is kind of emerging opportunities in distance delivery of health. Education, and again, distance education, financial services, and then broader management and consulting services. If you're interested in kind of, you know, looking at opportunities to work with the IDB, it's good to know that there are 3 types of procurement. And here you'll see a brief definition and kind of links to find out more. But that first one of operational procurement is by far the largest bulk. This is where the IDB will give loans to countries, and usually the countries are responsible for procuring goods and services with that money, and the IDB just kind of, oversees the procurement to make sure that it aligns with standards. But the other two there as well, bank executed operations and corporate procurement, are also can provide opportunities, especially if you're looking to do, provide consulting services to the IDB. And again, when you're looking at identifying opportunities, there's a lot of publicly available information on the IDB website and at different stages. So every 4 or 5 years, the IDB negotiates a country strategy with each country. As the new government comes in after elections, or usually just before the elections they start. And so all of those country strategies are online, and they identify what the priority sectors will be in each country over the next 4 or 5 years. So you can see, Argentina or Bahamas will be looking at energy and the health sector and strengthening their state accountability or that kind of thing. So that already gives you an idea of what opportunities could be coming up. Then as you get into the project pipeline, there are procurement plans that are published and specific kind of procurement notices that are also published. And all of those are available on the IDB website. And here is where you can find the links to all of those. So I just wanted to kind of embed those in a slide so that you could reference them afterwards. The last thing, this is the last slide that I'll mention, is Connect Americas, which is that last link there. This is a social network or a platform that's kind of hosted by the IDB for businesses. And in the Americas, but also globally. And so if you're looking to make connections with potential local partners, business to business connections, then Connect Americas can be a really good platform for doing that. And it's free to sign up. Canadian companies have had good experiences with it. And so I would leave it there, but I'm very happy to answer any questions later on, or feel free to follow up with me afterwards. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Darren. The links that are very valuable that you've included in your presentation, we're going to embed those in a kind of a notes that we're going to circulate with the feedback link, the simple survey link over the next day or so. So they'll be in there as well. So they'll be very useful. Thank you for highlighting those. Greatly appreciated. Next, we're going to have a speaker who is going to speaking about the IDB's objectives, structure, project financing and operations. And our speaker's name is Christian Gischler. He's the lead energy specialist for Latin America. Mr. Gischler is the focal point for sustainable energy within the Inter-American Development Bank, with over 17 years of experience in energy and environmental sector in Latin America and the Caribbean. Currently, he is leading several initiatives in renewable energy, energy efficiency, bioenergy, and migration of climate change. Mr. Gischler is actively working and promoting sustainable energy projects and programs throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. So Christian, welcome, and you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for this invitation. Also, thank you, Aaron, for having me this morning. And I'll be happy to share a presentation and two topics that I think that may be very important for Canada as a whole. And can you tell me if you are seeing my presentation? Okay, good. All right then. So maybe not for the North Atlantic sector of Canada, but for big chunks of Canada, this presentation will be very useful. And then my colleague Veronica Prado, she will be talking about energy efficiency, and that of course is a very hot topic for that part of Canada, because there are many companies involved in this. So, well, Darren already explained how you apply, where we are more active, and so on. So I will be showing you more or less the trends on what is happening and what's hot, literally hot, in Latin America. Okay. So let me see this. So this is this is geothermal. Where we are active in geothermal, and to see what is the big potential that Latin America has, and where Canada can play a huge role. In Mexico, we have around $51 million in drilling. Canada is it's one of the biggest countries who are doing drilling for oil and gas, and they are looking for going green. And going green may come very handy when you're talking about geothermal, because this is an industry where you use all that knowledge in geoscience and geology, geochemistry, and apply it to produce a product which is basically hot water or steam to produce energy from the subsoil, right? So we have active projects in Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, the Eastern Caribbean, in 3 islands, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in Colombia, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. In all of them, we have several degrees of advancement. So we basically have, in some places, we're developing wells, in others, we're doing studies. In others, we're developing even or financing the plant. So as you can imagine, we have different levels of studies that are associated and different levels of procurement that goes along with this, right? So just to tell you that geothermal power is not only about producing electricity. Here you can see many areas where we're moving beyond the traditional heat and electricity from that heat. The first one is of course producing reliable and affordable electricity. And also integration with other renewables. As you know, geothermal is baseload power, and it can integrate really well with solar and wind in order to produce that buffer in order to avoid intermittencies of solar and wind. The state of California has now a certain amount of geothermal that is sort of mandatory in order to buffer the intermittencies of solar and wind. So this is coming big, and it's getting more and more important as solar and wind has a big role in Latin America. Now, the other important part is that until now, we thought about geothermal as producing electricity, as I said before, but now we can use the electricity to produce hydrogen. And we are going to talk about that in the coming slides. But producing hydrogen from geothermal sources is becoming or has a huge potential in Latin America. In New Zealand, the first geothermal plant for hydrogen production has been established, and it's really a very new thing that can really produce hydrogen, and then from that hydrogen produce energy carriers as ammonia and methanol that can be then sold and exported to other places in the world. We can also, with the heat of this industry, we can also develop greenhouse for plant development, flowers, and so on. So it produces a microclimate that you can have it steady during the whole year. In Kenya, for example, today Kenya is the third producing, the country that has the third production, the highest, biggest production of flowers that goes to the European market. And they do that because of the heat from the Olkaria project, a geothermal project. So if Kenya can do that, that can also happen in Colombia, El Salvador, and some other places where you have that heat and they are also producing some agro products. The local industry can benefit from this because you can use much of the heat requirements in the new wave of decarbonization of cement, steel, and many other plants that are hard to abate. You can use this kind of technologies in order to decarbonize those heavy, hard to abate industries. And lastly, we have the district heating. This is also something that in Canada is very common because of the cold air that you have there, but it will become pretty common in the southern cities of Chile and perhaps Argentina, and in the high areas of the Andes. So we're looking at using heat from the soil, not necessarily to produce electricity, but just to harness that heat in order to do climatization, heating and cooling. So this slide here is a very interesting one. Perhaps you don't know, for those who know, great for you, that in Colombia, the first Canadian firm who is doing oil and gas has the first geothermal project from an oil and gas well. So basically they're using the heat from an oil and gas well to produce geothermal power and then use that power, that green power, for their processes. Moving forward, what we would like here is to use the heat for or from abandoned oil and gas wells, so that from an abandoned oil and gas well, we are producing a green power. And this is pretty cool. And that a Canadian firm is already doing this, it's even more cool. Now, what we're looking here is also that as I said before, the geothermal can move on to hydrogen, and in New Zealand, the Mokai project is actually doing that, and they want to expand that possibility. And as we see there, the opportunities for hydrogen are enormous. So let me talk about hydrogen. So this is the new trend that is happening in all around the world, and also Canada is looking at this. And just for those who are not very acquainted with all of this, basically we're talking about two types of hydrogen. One hydrogen is the one that comes from renewable energy sources, and because of that power, you can take the water molecule, H2O, and split it into H2 and O2. And when you do that, you're basically producing what we call green hydrogen. So if you combine the potential or the installed capacity of Latin America in renewables, we're talking about 56% of all energy produced in Latin America comes from renewable energy sources, and this is for electricity purposes only. You can think that there is an enormous potential to have dedicated plants to produce hydrogen from a green source. So the amount of green hydrogen could be really substantial. And then what Canada is currently doing is from natural gas, essentially they take the hydrogen from the natural gas and abate the carbon emissions. That is called blue hydrogen. And Canada is a leader in terms of carbon capture and storage and utilization. And that for many countries where natural gas still is out there and there is a way to capture those emissions and reduce those emissions, all these technologies makes a lot of sense. So we're talking about places like Trinidad, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, so Argentina. So all those places will have to have some kind of form of carbon capture and storage in order to be really competitive. And Canada can really, really show the way. Now, this is in production. So let's go to uses. So it's the other half of this pie. So in uses, of course, the main use perhaps would be methanol and ammonia. So it's basically transforming that hydrogen into a form of ammonia, which is NH3 for those who remember chemistry at school, and methanol, CH3OH, which basically can be then put into a boat, a vessel, and shipped away, and it can be used as a synthetic fuel or directly. So this is a great possibility that is happening. So for all places that you can have the combination of renewable energy, infrastructure, and the capacity to transform, this will be a big deal, okay? Fuel cells, so everything related to transport and heavy-duty transport, train, mining trucks, and especially what Canada has in all its mining operations in Latin America. So mining trucks can eventually shift towards hydrogen using fuel cells or combusting directly hydrogen for their engines, and therefore lowering the emissions. Heavy industry, so cement plants, steel, and you name it, all the hard to abate plants that could use hydrogen. This is a huge opportunity, and I think that Canada is really well placed for this. This graph shows basically the how hydrogen is really doubling and tripling the amount by year. And for now, we have been using that gray hydrogen, which is basically from natural gas without the carbon capture. And when we introduce the carbon capture, it's a big player, and also is the green hydrogen. So there's a lot to develop in terms of consultancies, expert in related to hydrogen, related to renewables, combination of infrastructure, so you name it. There's lots of opportunity, but the competition will be fierce. So it's important to adapt and learn this well. But there's no better teacher than what Canada has already done. So it's basically applying that to the rest of the region. And this is basically to show where green hydrogen will be a powerhouse, and where blue hydrogen may become also a powerhouse. So Mexico has both of them. All Central America will be probably focused in green hydrogen, and mainly linked in some cases to solar and wind, but also geothermal. In the case of Trinidad, probably the predominant gas would be blue hydrogen. And Colombia will do both. Chile will probably be focused on green hydrogen. Brazil on both. Argentina on both as well. Uruguay and Paraguay mainly green hydrogen. So essentially, where are the areas where IDB is helping and planning to help? Training, dialogue, all that. Seminars like this one, all of this, the outreach to the countries and to the companies. That's what we were doing, a lot of that. Then basically working with the countries in elaborating hydrogen strategies, roadmaps, subsector roadmaps, regulation, certification. Remember that it's not the same to have green or blue hydrogen. In the market, it will be paid differently. So there will be a premium probably for green hydrogen, but the countries in Europe, North America, and Asia will want to know if that hydrogen comes from a green source or from a blue source. So certification will be a big deal. Feasibilities, pre-feasibility studies, development of pilot project implementation, and of course, the financing of large-scale projects business models, and so on. So all of this is really something that Canada is already doing, but mainly inside Canada. What we would like to see is all of this outside of Canada and perhaps partnering with countries, local firms, or other international firms to develop these projects in Latin America. That's it, Craig. So on to you now.
Well, that is certainly an education for me in hydrogen and the opportunities that exist in Latin America and the Caribbean. I really appreciate it. This is a great opportunity for companies on the line that want to tap in to Christiane's knowledge. When we finish, we have one more speaker. You can post your questions to the Q&A or the chat, and we'll go through your questions when we finish. So that'll be great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that insight, and we look forward to engaging you again in the future. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Next, we have another speaker from the Inter-American Development Bank to complement Christiane's presentation is Miss Veronica Prado. She's the Senior Energy Specialist. Veronica currently serves in the Inter-American Development Bank's infrastructure and energy sector, assigned to the country office of Barbados. Her main areas of work include energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric mobility, policy and regulatory reform, energy transition and decarbonization strategies, and innovative financing mechanisms in the energy sector. So she's clearly very busy. Prior to her appointment, she served as a research economist for the University of Oxford's Department of Economics, where she developed and implemented interventions in the fields of economic development, natural resource management, infrastructure, and energy in Africa and Southeast Asian countries. So we want to thank and welcome Veronica. And Veronica, we're excited to hear what you have to say. The floor is all yours, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you very much, everyone. Hard act to follow after Christian, but I'll do my best, and I'll just give you a very short presentation so we can have a little bit more time for discussion. Just give a general overview about some of the challenges and opportunities in the energy sector in the Caribbean. Then I will give you a little bit more of information about my current home country, which is Barbados. And then I'll show you some upcoming procurement opportunities that Canadian firms could potentially participate. So I would appreciate if someone could go to the next slide. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to start with the general overview of where some of the Caribbean countries stand, because I think it's a great reference to demonstrate that most of the country, with exception of two, they do have a target for renewable energy and energy efficiency. So it's very exciting to work in a region where governments are committed. Some targets are very shy, some others are very ambitious, but the governments are definitely committed to participate actively and effectively in this process of energy transition. So there's a lot of scope for energy efficiency, for renewables, and for all the different services that are involved in promoting this transition. So just to give an illustration that this is a very exciting region to work with and for, and there are many, many opportunities. Can we go into the next slide? Well, despite the fact that all the governments, they do have targets, I think I just would like to characterize some of the key challenges that it's very common and it's sharing amongst most of the Caribbean countries. The challenges are mostly the ones that we already know, or most of you would know, but it's very important to know what are the challenges, because the operations that we design try to answer and to address some of these market failures and some of these challenges that the countries have. So most of the countries, they have a high level of dependency on imported and expensive oil. They have a high cost of electricity. Some of the countries, they do have the highest tariffs in the world. Barbados right now, for example, is an average between 26, 27 cents of a dollar. And the average, for example, in South America is about 17, 16. So there's an implied and direct cost of doing business or doing anything else in the Caribbean because of the high cost of electricity. Most of the countries, if not all, they have a program with the IMF, and they have high levels of debt compared to their GDP. They do have very macroeconomic delicate situation. Some of them, and most of them, they still have emerging institutions and the institutionality. They're still working quite a bit on enhancing and strengthening their regulatory agencies and other institutions. They're extremely vulnerable to many natural disasters. I'm just now stuck in another country, not being able to go back to Barbados because we had the eruption of a volcano in St. Vincent, and the airport of Barbados was still closed, just reopened, but the situation with all the ashfall is still predominant. So it's been very difficult. And these are the kind of events that happen in this region very often that interrupt the flux of services and goods and works. Most of my projects in energy are on hold now because we're still cleaning up all the ash, and we still have to be prepared for another wave of ashfall possibly coming, hitting the island. So it's never a dull moment to be in the Caribbean, to work there, to develop projects there. And this is the hurricane season hasn't even started, and we are going through all of these issues. So just to keep this in mind. And in some countries, last but not least, which is the case of some areas of Guyana and Suriname, is still the lack of access to electricity, right? Most of the other countries, the other islands in the Caribbean, they have close to 100% of electrification of access. Just in the case of Suriname and Guyana, there's still lots of projects in electrification, rural electrification, and trying to get to this last mile of energy access, universal use. In order to address all of these main challenges, we work with basically three general objectives, which is really to promote the diversification of the energy sector, to move away from this dependence on fossil fuels, and also to promote sustainable and universal access. And the second very important area is to promote energy efficiency. So we look on the supply side, greening the supply side, but transforming and make extremely efficient the demand side. There is a huge potential because of the high cost of electricity. Also, the opportunity cost there is much greater than in many other regions of the world. And then last but not least, we focus a lot on institutional strengthening and capacity building. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, most of the countries, they do have targets, they have very clear objectives, but they still need to develop many policies and regulations in order to really implement this transformation in the energy sector. And in some of the countries, there's a lot of looking into different technologies, renewables, solar, wind, onshore and offshore. Most recently, we've done a very sophisticated study on potential for offshore wind in Barbados. I know some Canadian investors have reached to the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. I would advise if you have any interest, for example, in wind onshore and offshore to really reach into the government of Barbados, they would be providing and publishing a lot of information for investors and some specific guidelines on how to develop projects in these specific areas. And then there is also this huge potential for expanding sectoral energy efficiency, which I know it is very important and big for Canadian firms. And last but not least, again, this whole support that we have been providing to the institutions to develop design policy that's coherent with these new targets on the sustainable energy. If you could move into the next slide, please. So here I would like to tell you a little bit just about Barbados, because I could not go on without telling a little bit about the work that we have been doing in Barbados to address some of these key challenges. It's been very interesting for the past few years. I think I took a lot of advantage on the great work that Christian developed over a decade in Barbados. And then I continue with many important initiatives for the transformation of the energy sector in Barbados. You know, and this is a great reference in the region. We, besides having very clear targets and ambitious 100% renewable by 2030 and full decarbonization of the economy, that's a great challenge there. But I do believe we do have many technologies and approaches to achieve that. I think the main challenge is in the affordability and the sustainability of some of these initiatives, but to promote full decarbonization of economies, it is possible. And if we all put our brains together, financing, it can be successfully achieved. I think the other important thing about the sector in Barbados that I would like to share with you is that the government has been promoting now energy transformation. Before, we had a slightly different energy policy and targets. And since 2018, this ambitious target has been published and is now being promoted. And in order to really make sure that this can be achievable, the country is having to promote some reforms at the legal and the regulatory. And one of the very important transformations that's promoting now is the new market design. So why I say that this is important is because before generation and, for example, storage, it was only focused on in the hands of the utility. But now all of that is liberalized and it's open for competition. The government has, I think I would appreciate if you could go back. The government has published the feed-in tariffs, you know, which is an important price mechanism for promoting renewable energy. Right now, it's a feed-in tariff is up to 10 megawatts. It's temporary, but it would be for the next 20 years for projects up to 5 megawatts. And we are in the process of supporting the government, the ministry, and the regulatory agents to design a competitive procurement framework, basically auction for renewables. And this is really related to the work also that we have been doing with the government, which is designing the first integrated resource and resilience plan for the country. There's a very sophisticated models on how you get there in this next decade in an affordable and sustainable way. So there's an optimization of different resources and different approaches. And the best way to do that and to have a very vibrant, competitive, transparent market is through a combination of feed-in tariff and auctions. And also the government is working to design and implement some regulation on cutting edge technologies, mostly storage, which would play a key role for this energy transition in the case of Barbados, because we do not have, unfortunately, firm renewable hydro or geothermal potential. So we need to make sure that we optimize all this intermittent renewable with storage and some other technologies to effectively manage the grid. So now I'd like to go into the next slide, and I will shift away from Barbados, and I'll just give you a little taste of some of the other projects or areas of action that we are developing in the other countries in the region that are country members. So I think Barbados, I already mentioned some of the projects or initiatives or broader areas that we are focusing. Our portfolio there is one of the largest in the region. It's over 100 million in investment of loans and a combination of investment grants. We have been doing a lot of the promotion of renewable energy, new technologies, energy efficiency. It takes almost half of the funds of the portfolio in Barbados. It's very critical. It's one of the main objectives of the Barbadian government. There's a lot of support, investment, funding, in electric mobility, electrification of different sectors. There's also a lot of support in this, as I say, policy and regulatory reform. In the case of Bahamas, it's slightly different because the bulk of the funds of our loans are being invested in the rehabilitation of the infrastructure that has been greatly devastated with the hurricane a few years ago. And there's also a huge focus on resilience. We're designing a few microgrids amongst the different islands in specific areas, and really not only rebuild in a resilient, but a smart way all the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure for the country. In Guyana, there's also all these different elements that we have mentioned before, the resilience, the focus on renewable energy, also on renewable, but because part of the country is still do not have access to electricity, there's a huge focus on the rural electrification in Guyana, which is different for countries like Bahamas and Barbados. You could project the next slide. So in Jamaica too, the bulk of our operations in Barbados is specifically renewable energy and energy efficiency retrofit in public buildings. They're currently retrofitting a significant number of public buildings and hospitals, the largest hospitals in the country, and also investing quite a bit on electric mobility. And also developing the national electricity loss reduction planning. Unfortunately, in the case of Jamaica and Guyana, energy loss is still extremely high. And once a plan that's able to effectively address the issue, it could generate many savings for the country. And then we have Suriname, that's a hybrid between what we're just saying about Jamaica and Barbados and Guyana, because it has a lot of financing on upgrading the energy sector infrastructure. There's a huge focus on rural electrification, renewables, upgrading of the transmission distribution infrastructure, and also increasing energy access. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have investment operation there. We are just working with a very important technical cooperation to really design an intervention on energy efficiency, on the and also on to design frameworks for promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy. Now I'd like to show you a little bit some of the procurement opportunities that we currently have in these countries. As it was mentioned before, there's a specific site in the bank's page and also in the UNDP that shows all the procurement plan of all operations and all the procurement plan opportunities that is currently open and the ones that will come up in the future. There are many that are open, but it's underway. I'm just mentioning here the ones that will be initiating within the next month or so. So if you need any further information, just reach out to me after this discussion, or just go into specific areas of their website of the bank and then look into the procurement opportunities per country, and you would see all of these opportunities that I'm mentioning. Some are going to be opening within the next month or so, and some others within the next 6 months or year. But I just wanted to give you a head start because I know that it's a great opportunity, and specifically in the area of energy efficiency, I really would like to make sure that all Canadian firms are fully aware and can participate. In the case of Barbados, we're just now have a few procurement processes open. I think one of the largest ones is the 5 megawatt solar PV plant that we are going to be contracting, hopefully within the next few months. We're going to be looking to hiring a consulting firm to do energy audits and some structural assessment in public buildings, because one of the loans that we're just starting execution, we are going to be undertaking the retrofit of 100 public buildings. So there's a huge scope for Canadian companies to participate. In the next year, we are going to be publishing this very substantial activity, procurement activity, that's to be identifying a firm to retrofit all of these buildings. And oftentimes we have procurement activity that's focused more on services, consulting firms providing services, designing studies, and we have at least another $1 million that will be going to those initiatives. We have had at least a few contracts awarded to Canadian firms. I think Stuntech, we have been working closely with Stuntech. They have been awarded quite a few contracts in the projects that we're developing in Barbados, for example. And then we have some procurement opportunities in the Bahamas, mostly on the transmission distribution reconstruction systems. They're smaller, but once we put all of this together, it amounts to 20, 30, 40 millions per country. And that's, once you put them all together, right now, it's more than 150 million in procurement opportunities open in just within the loan operations that we currently have. And then we have many initiatives also in Guyana, some smaller solar PV plants, some transmission distribution upgrades in the substations. So these are smaller, but for the country, it's very important to develop this project. Sometimes we may look, this is a 5 million project or a procurement process, 20, but it's very important because some of these companies, they go into the specific countries in the region, they make partnership with the local contractors, local firms, they develop know-how and how to execute projects in the region, and they place them very strategically to continue to be awarded contracts in the region, because it's very important to have the understanding and to understand how to execute projects in the region. It's slightly peculiar. So getting into some of these smaller activities, it's very strategic if you do want to in the future be awarded larger contracts in the region. I think we have 2 more countries to go that I would like to mention some of the procurement activities that are currently open or in the process of being published. Jamaica, as I've mentioned, is doing lots of initiatives on energy efficiency retrofit, like I say, public buildings and hospitals. It's what they have open currently and will be opening within the next few months. It represents over 24 million. So it would be important that Canadian firms that are highly specialized in energy efficiency retrofit to look into these processes. I think you have a lot of knowledge and experience to share, and it will be great to have you all participating in these processes. All the processes that we currently have or will be opening also in Suriname are quite substantial. If you put them all together, it amounts to about 17 million. So it's smaller solar PV projects, because I mentioned, since they're still addressing rural electrification, access, they tend to build smaller projects, microgrids, to provide electricity to some of these communities that are away from the urban centers. There is a lot of investments in upgrading the transmission distribution systems and the infrastructure. And there are opportunities too for consultancies to design some feasibility study for LNG facility, and also some consultancy to support the tender process for utility scale renewable energy projects. I think that's the message that I want to share with you, that there are many challenges in the region, but there are also many opportunities. And the way we organize the loans and our initiatives in the region generates all of these great opportunities for many firms to participate and be involved in this energy transition, this transformation that's taking place in the region and some of the countries that I have mentioned. So happy to answer any questions if you may have. Thank you.
You're on mute there, Craig, if you're talking.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you for that comprehensive overview of the Caribbean and your role there, and specifically drilling into countries, giving us the actually background thought on why their priorities and the kind of issues and challenges that they're engaging in the various different countries, and then the projects that they're getting involved in, and the opportunities for Canadian companies, and highlighting even some of the Canadian companies and Atlantic Canadian companies that are participating and currently working on projects there. Certainly a wealth of information, really appreciated. We do have opportunity for, there are some questions in the Q&A there. I'm going to defer now to Aaron. Just want to say thank you again, Veronica. That was very valuable.
Perfect. Thanks, Craig. So we do have a couple questions. The first that has been asked is, does the IDB consider unsolicited proposals from non-government entities? I'm not sure who on our panel wants to answer that. Maybe Darren, you might have the expertise for that one.
Sure, I could take a stab, and then if anybody else wants to come in. The short answer is no, but it's more nuanced than that, because I think it's one of those things where if you've got an idea for a project or what have you, it's probably better to kind of build it from the ground up in terms of kind of making the connections either with the sector specialists at the IDB or with the country office in terms of kind of checking to see if they're, if that's aligned with what they're looking to do in the country, and if there would be possibilities. And then depending on kind of the nature of the proposal, they could, suggest that you work with a local company or a part of the local government to kind of develop a proposal. But a lot of it's very much, I worked at Global Affairs before, Global Affairs Canada, and CEDA before that, the Canadian International Development Agency, where you could submit an unsolicited proposal, an NGO or a company or what have you. The IDB works very much with partners in terms of developing the proposals, whether it's a private sector company or the government. And so it's very much kind of like it's led by the country government or the local company, but it's very much a process of co-creation. And so while they don't accept unsolicited proposals, there are opportunities to kind of work with the IDB or local partners to develop a project.
All right, thanks. Another question that came up was that someone said we weren't clear on how small Canadian companies were supposed to access the huge hydrogen opportunities. So perhaps maybe Christian, you could.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, well, as I said before, there are several steps and several areas where companies can provide their services and knowledge. As you see, there's one part which is basically certification. There are many companies in Canada that can provide the service of certifying you know, in this case, a certain stream of gas is actually hydrogen, and that hydrogen comes from either fossil fuel or from renewable energy. In feasibility studies for small pilot projects or for larger projects. So there are many companies in Canada who are actually pretty good in the oil and gas part, petrochemical, engineering, and then basically you can pick and choose areas. And the other important thing that Darren also mentioned before is developing consortiums, big, strong consortiums. So a small company of Canada who may have a certain expertise in a certain topic may not necessarily qualify for the entire procurement that is being requested. But if they can put together a consortium of other companies that can provide those additional expertise and then present together a solid proposal, well, there's a way how you basically surpass that barrier, right? So there are many ways. There are many ways of doing it. So that's a way of presenting together a strong proposal in one of the many bidding processes that we will be participating or making them happen during this year and the next one. So I think it's important there. And when you have a specific niche, just work on that, but make sure that you complement yourself well in the other niches so that you are fully answering the request of proposals, so that you are not kicked out. Okay.
Perfect, thanks. And one other question for you while you're still on the screen there just came in. Is there a registry of Canadian companies working in geothermal and or hydrogen?
I don't know if there is a registry, like a formal registry, but what we do is when we request services, usually there is an expression of interest and all companies from Canada are welcome. Now, when you do an expression of interest, it doesn't mean that you say, hey, I'm interested, and therefore you would pass to the next phase. You really need to show why your company firm is qualified enough, or you have the expertise and everything that is being demanded in that expression of it. That will allow you to pass to the next phase. Okay? But there is not such a thing as a formal registry, and if you're not in that registry, you cannot compete.
Perfect, thank you. Another question here says, how do we get involved in project investment appraisal? So specifically modeling, evaluation, advisory, and transaction structuring for renewable energy projects.
Well, I can answer a part of it, and maybe Veronica can answer the rest of it. It's the same thing. I mean, in order to develop that area of expertise, I think that Canada has a lot of that, especially working in wind, hydro projects, less in solar, in geothermal now, and in hydrogen, really leaders for now in many areas. So engaging with the financial part in putting projects together, project finance, the modeling, it's an expertise that is being more and more required. For the public sector, when we do PPP structures, where we have public sector and the private sector, and we develop an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, where we will use that kind of facilities, or directly by the private sector of the bank, where financial structuring is required, right? So all these areas will be needed, and more because as countries suffer the pandemic, there is less cash from the public sector to deal with this, and it's more from the private sector that has to come in. Veronica, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think I had a moment that I was disconnected with my microphone. So if you could just rephrase what was the specific question.
Yeah, it was how do we get involved in project investment appraisal, specifically modeling and evaluation and advisory and transaction structuring for renewable energy projects?
I mean, I think the best way to do, I think it was mentioned by Darren and I think Christian, but it's really to work with the local government, the local institutions in the country, and to be very much involved in the process, trying to understand. I know the Canadian Embassy, for example, in Barbados is extremely active, and I do believe that if Canadian firms, they do have interest and wanted to be aware of the upcoming opportunities, not only for procurement, but for the overall development of the sector. Like I just mentioned, that we still don't have procurement activities for offshore and onshore wind projects, but there's a huge potential, and the government's in the process of publishing some very specific information for investors, and it's also the guidelines for developing projects. So if there are Canadian firms that are interested in wind projects, this is a good time for them to reach out to the Barbadian authorities to start looking into how they go about developing the projects, how they can structure, how they can purchase land, get a permit and things like that. I think a close engagement with the local authorities and try to understand very closely what's coming up in next, it can make a huge difference. And I think in parallel, monitor all these different procurement opportunities that are constantly posted in our website.
Perfect, thanks, Veronica. And that feeds right into the last quick question that was there was, is the best way to pursue the IDB projects through country searches, or does the site have a filter that you can specify project type?
I can answer that. You can search by both on the IDB project websites, by country or by sector. And one thing to know is that the IDB also publishes contract award data, so you can see which companies are winning projects, and that can either be, potential partners, or just kind of better understanding that market and understanding which companies are active. So we'll include those links. I think Craig already mentioned it. It'll all be included in our email that we send out with all the links to the right parts of the IDB website.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Leah. I think that's all of our questions, and I see there. So I want to thank everyone again for their time, and to everyone who has attended the last number of webinars. Thanks so much. We really appreciate your attention to these wonderful topics. So again, thanks everyone today. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch with you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Before you, I just want to remind everybody about the questionnaire. One of the critical parts about the questionnaire, and I am going to mention it again, is as a follow-up for us to be able to know if we're hitting the mark with this, and for your specific needs. But further to that is as well, and more importantly, is what kind of information can we be providing as it relates to IFI, more targeted for your company's needs. So we're going to put some a list of topics in there, but also giving you an opportunity to write a narrative on, what kind of information and insight you're looking for to be able to facilitate more activity and opportunities through IFIs. Back to you, Aaron.
Perfect. That's all I had. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you to our speakers.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Everyone.
Leah,
Take care.
Veronica, and Darren.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Darren.
much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.